Well, what's going on there, YouTube? Jimmy P. Brown II here. It's been a while. So, doing a quick gear segment, and I do mean quick. I get so many questions as to, what is my preference for my recording and all sorts of different ideas, and especially, just over the years, what I've used and what I've done. There's no question that Mesa is always been probably the hugest part of my tone. I have experimented over the years with many different types of amplification. Of course, there's a lot of great stuff out there. Of course, fantastic old Marshalls are just great. It's just finding that right one. Because all amps have their own character. You can have five, Mesa Mark threes in a row, and it doesn't mean that they're all going to sound killer. They all have their own characteristics, and whoever built them, and put a little extra love into them. So, that said, again, but the overall guts and the overall nook and crannies there. So. But I have used Bogner. I'm a big fan of Bogner. Particularly, really dug the Shiva. I had a Shiva KT66, and the thing was a powerhouse. It was loud. It was toneful. It was huge. I did have one problem with it. It was just too loud. With the tones of the KT66, you had to really crank it to get that tone, and it was so blisteringly loud that I would have to like stand outside of the room with the door closed, and even when I'd pull up my volume on my guitar, still getting massive feedback. Through the door, a large room, standing at least 25 feet away from the amp, and I'm still getting feedback. But man, the tone, it was great, good tone. So, but it was just a very loud amp, and there was no getting around it. I also had a Helios, or from Bogner, and I really liked it. The only problem is that I had transformer issues. I just kept blowing through transformers, and Bogner kept saying that it was dirty power in the studio that I was recording in, but I 10 other amps in there, and I never had any issues with any of them. And I had a couple of great vintage amps in there. I had a couple of vintage Supros and a Vox AC30 vintage in there, and never had any issue. I don't know exactly what went wrong with that. I think it was just a lemon, and everything. There's a lemon in everything. So, but as far as tone, man, wow, great sound, great tone. I had it with a 212 Bogner and a 412 Bogner. Bogner cabinets are pretty cool. I think they're a little overpriced for what they are. There's some great sounding cabinets out there. You can't beat a Marshall. The good old 800 cab, man. They're just such a beefy, weighty, meaty cab, and they're not overly heavy, but they just load them up with the right speakers, and they just sound great. You can't beat them. My favorite cabinet, though, of all time, will always be the Recto 212 from Mesa. At one time I owned four, and people would always ask, why don't you just have two 412s, instead of having four 212s? It just doesn't make sense. Well, the 212s just have their own tone, they have their own magic, and I just really loved them and thought they were great. They just had a vibe, and that's my favorite cab. As of late, I've just been a fan of combo amps, and because I'm not 20 years old anymore, and it's not easy to carry the separates. But I've owned some Vox amps, Bogner, Engel. I've used a plethora of different amps. Everybody knows I like Dr. Z amps. Dr. Z's makes some great amps, and I dig them. They're specific sounding. They're not super versatile, but which the doctor would disagree. But for what I do, at least, they're not completely versatile. Because I've always got to have a high gain setting on no matter what amp I'm working with. I've always got to have that option, and I don't want to have that option with having to go to, oh, okay, well, I got to go to a pedal then if I want to go high gain. I like to drive the tubes and get, power tube distortion. So that's what I like. So that's been the big question. So, obviously rectifiers are always going to be like king of the hills for recording. They're just great for high end, high gain. People are going to always argue, between the single, the dual, or the triple rec. If you need the volume and you're playing on a stadium stage, well then yeah, a couple of triple recs are going to take care of you. Dual recs are awesome. Definitely great tone. But a single rec for home recording has just always, always taken care of me. And I personally like the Recto Verb 50. It's a great amp. They mic well. They're real easy to mic. Mesas were definitely not known for miking very easily. In fact, they were always probably one of the hardest amps to mic, especially in the early days with the Mark 1, Mark 2. I had a Mark 2C, I had a Mark 2C Plus, and my Mark 3. Just not easy amps to mic. And what I found later, really, what it was is the cabinets, because the old cabinets just weren't the best. But they've come a long way again, and like I said, with the release of that 212 Recto cabinet, I think they just found their perfect niche. It's an easy cabinet to mic. You can put just throw your 57, and that's the other question that I've been getting a lot. What do you mic with? SM57. Usually a little off access, depending on what I'm wanting to get from the tone, what kind of sound I'm wanting to get, because obviously everything depends on where you're running your EQ, where you're running your presence, and what's coming out of the speaker, and then you want to decide from there. Okay, well, how am I going to mic it? And then what I like to do, just for as a second track, I like to come off of it with some sort of condenser mic. 414 is just like super. And I just got a 414 clone from Sweetwater, and I think it's called the TL2, but it's just fantastic. It's just love the sound of it. It's got like an old vintage sound, but it uses titanium on the diaphragm versus typical gold sputter. So, but again, fantastic tone. But what I do with the condenser mic is I bring it back a little, bring it back about a foot and a half. It's all experimentation, to get that nice tight, punchy drive sound. You're always going to need that SM57 just right up on it. Some people like the Sennheiser 421. I've tried them, I've used them. I also know that they make that small block one. I can't remember the hanging mic. Good for live, from what I understand, but I've never been a fan of the way the 421 sounds on a guitar cabinet. I just like everything's. Remember, there's no right or wrongs. When it comes to recording, it's just all preference, and not letting your ears lie to you. You just trust your ears and say, okay, well, that's a good tone. That's what I like. What I'm getting out of that. But the SM57, another condenser mic I like. for that. And the reason I do the condenser mic is so I can get some space, some air. And a condenser mic obviously is going to just have a totally different character as far as sound. It's not going to be that tight punch, but it's going to do some great sound and great tone, and give you some nice option too when you're blending later. Always put it on a separate track, so that way you're not stuck with just the one track. You know, it's the best way to do it, at least for me. But I also like the blueberry. It's a great mic. Overall, wonderful sound, wonderful tone, very neutral, but yet has a character to it. Every mic's going to have its own character. You know, when you hear about, yeah, this mic's completely transparent and doesn't add any color or character. You know, if that's the case, then I don't know how good that mic is. I mean, that's the reason we have all this different mics in our mic lockers, because we like the character of that mic. So, but I do like the blueberry. It's a super cool mic. Pick one up used for around $4 or $5. Brand new, they're $1,000. The TL2 that I picked up from Sweetwater is really cool. It's like a $500 mic. It's pretty cheap, you know, compared to a 414 that costs $1,000. And in essence, it's the same mic. You know, people argue, okay, well, you know, this one was made in China and cheaper components, this and that and the other thing. But again, I always go by the tone, and I have a 414 as well as the clone. And honestly, there's things about the clone I like better. So, and mine's like a late or early 2000s model. So, I don't know, you know, again, everything's preference. There's no right or wrongs in recording. So the one thing, and then people ask, you know, well, do you ever use software? Do you use, and there's sometimes I do. I have, it took me a while to warm up to using an Axe-Fx. The Fractal, but I use an AX8, and I do like that. There's some great tones and great sounds. The one thing that I will say about, if anything, about going Fractal or going Kemper, ease. You know, I can do a fly out with a Fractal like nothing, no problem, as opposed to packing one of these in a road case and taking it with me. So that, and the other thing is, it's the same sound every time you get there. Wherever you go, wherever you play, it's the same tone. Anybody that knows a tube amp, tube amps are super finicky. You know, they're very picky as far as amount of power they're drawing, amount of power that they're bringing in. And you know, you can have everything set perfectly and say, yeah, there it is, I dialed in the right tone, turn it off, come back the next day, fire it up, wait to, you know, your 5-10 minutes. That's what I do. I always wait 5 or 10 minutes before I start playing. And then it just, the tone's different. Tone sounds, something's changed. The magic that you had yesterday is gone, and it's not ear burnout or anything else. It's just that tubes just react to electricity, and we don't have perfect current flow that's constantly going unless you are somehow, some way have been able to wire your room and work with the electric company, and you have attenuators and you have this and that and the other thing to make your flow always the same, which seems like a lot of work to go through. But that's just the way it is. But you know, nonetheless, the warm sound of a tube amp, there's just nothing like it. I mean, there just really is nothing like it. It has its own character and richness, and in some cases brittleness, and in the rectifier's case, certainly the fuzziness. But again, you know, everything is preferential. Everything's on, you know, personal taste, personal likes. So, you know, having owned so many different amps over the years, I was really quite fond of an amp that I owned for a while called the Splon. They make Scott made an amp for me called the Quick Rod 100. It's an amp that he makes, but I custom ordered one. And great guy, great people, and great amp. Boy, that amp was special. Had tone for days, had sustain for days. I mean, if you want that brown sound, from that first Van Halen album, where you just put in a delay pedal and a phase shifter and you just go for it. Yeah, that was the amp. Such a great sounding amp, and loved it for that. But again, wasn't super versatile. I hated the clean tone, but man, loved the dirty channels, and it was just superb, you know. But what are some of my favorite amps? Well, my everybody's always asking me. I mean, so is it the Mark III? Is it the Mark II C Plus? Is it I guess I'm the weird kid on the block because no one ever mentions this amp, but it's my favorite amp that Mesa ever made, and it's called the Electrodyne. And I'll bring a little close in view. The Electrodyne is a very, very simple setup. Very cool amp. It's a simulclass, so it runs at 45 or 90 watts. Real simple with a master presence, bass, mid, and treb, and a volume. And now, it's in essence a one-channel amp with 3 modes. So clean, low gain, and high gain. And the biggest thing that people argue is that the high gain is like a phony high gain. It's not a really high, well, yeah, if you need loads and loads of distortion, which I don't know why people do, but there are people that just love loads and loads of it, then yeah, this isn't probably the amp for you. But the high gain mode is fantastic on this amp. The other thing I really dig about it is that you can use 6L6s or EL34 amp tubes in it. So if you want to go more that Brit route, believe it or not, though, with the 6L6s, it's got a great British vibe. So if you like that 6L6 American punch, but you kind of have that leaning towards that British distortion or British gain, this amp does it beautifully, and it does a great job at low volumes, at high volumes. It just, I like it at the 45, but 90 watts when you want some of that, just power tube rich distortion and a nice volume. Yeah, it's smoking at 90. And that's when I like to run it through a 212. So then I'll break out the 212 cab and go from there. But it's my all-time favorite Mesa amp, and they're always surprised by that. It's like, wow, how do you like that amp? I don't know, it just has character. It has character, vibe. They only made them for a couple of years. I don't know why. I guess people just didn't pick up on how cool they were because they just weren't your typical Mesa, crank up the gain and just sit there and hold a note and let it just ring out for 10 minutes on its own for no reason. And that's cool. People like that super duper high gain. I gotcha. And that's why I have a rectifier. Now, why don't I have the dual rec? Why the single? Well, because I like the sound of the Recto 50. It just has its own character, again, its own sound, tons of gain on tap, which anybody who owns a dual or any of the rectifier series, you always put a tube screamer in front of it anyway and clean it up. It's a real fizzy sounding amp, and it's intentionally that way. I mean, that's just the sound of the amp. That's the tone it gets. And so you come in with a tube screamer and you give it a little bit of clarity. You kind of clean up some of that fizz and tighten up some of the distortion, so it's not just so bassy and bottom endy, but yet you tighten up that bottom end too, so you still get that punch. So that, and now again, single rec is just my preference. I've owned several dual rectifiers. They have their place. I particularly like them live. Out of these two, I would take the Electrodyne Live any day over the 50, the Recto Verb 50. And reason being is because it just has the guts, it has the tone, it has the balls to cut through. Where the Recto Verb, it would take, throwing it through I would say like a 212 and then just really, really pushing it, because these are both 112 combos. But for recording, they work perfectly. So, but the top guy, the Electrodyne, that's the one to take out live, because you got full 90 watts and it just is a beast. And some people have asked, oh, well, do you put a distortion pedal in front or an overdrive pedal in front? And it's like, nope, I don't do any of that to add more gain or to clean it up, or it's just perfect. So those are my preferences. So again, people ask, so what do you record with? That's the way I like to record. SM57 condenser mic about 1.5 feet away, intermix it in. And then for other stuff, the Fractal works fantastic. There are some cool guitar plugs out there. The one that is offered through Overloud through the Steven Slate plugin package is pretty darn cool. Some great tones in that thing. But if you're a guitar player, you hear it, and it's synthetic. You can hear it synthetic. And then Universal Audio offers some great idea. Their modeling of the is really fantastic, of the Friedman, and also the what is the other one that I really like? I don't know. I think they do a fantastic job of not only the. I'm sorry, I got distracted. My wife was yelling at my son. So, but I do like the Friedman mod, yeah, okay. You guys know what I mean. So anyway, so that's where I'm at with my rig run today. I've owned them all, pretty much almost different, every style, every from Randall, Bogner, Marshall, Vox, Dr. Z, Engel, even the fantastic Splon amps. And then there's a lot of great amps out there, and they're all great in their own right. But all roads always somehow lead back home to Petaluma. Just the way it is. So Jimmy P. Brown signing off. And just remember that, at least for me, all roads lead back to Petaluma, California, for that tone. You guys take care. Have a wonderful Sunday.